Karibuni. Asanteni kwa kuwa nasi leo. That is welcome. Thank you for being with us today in Ubuntu, otherwise as Kiswahili. I am excited to sit down with this brother, my brother, Dr. Kimoni, who I'm happy to have in my life, and I'm looking forward to the lessons he's going to teach us. A great brother. I'm going to let him introduce himself like we always do on Kumbukeni. But I say today, if you need to take notes, take notes. If you need to keep it quiet in the room, keep it quiet, because there are going to be a lot of lessons coming in today. So, Brother Kimoni, please introduce yourself.
Yes, Sakafet, also Hotep, Mekai, and greetings to our families. Peace to our family. It's truly an honor to be here with Sister Nduku, as well as this platform. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but as African people, there's nothing new under the sun. And we will be vigilant, as always.
So, Brother Kimoni recently, with a group of other brothers and sisters, visited Burkina Faso. And I said to him, you need to come and share with the community what you saw, what you witnessed, right? Because we have all this propaganda, all these false narratives that are being put out about our brother, Ibrahim Traoré, so that they can break him, so that they can take away a great leader once again from our people. And it's good to see what's happening, exactly what's happening in Burkina Faso, what the people are doing and how they feel about him, so that we know from an African, a fellow African, exactly what's happening, and not just from CNN, NBC, and all the other Western media that puts out false narratives and twists our narratives to create, to villainize us, right? To villainize us. So I'm looking forward to hearing from one of us exactly what they witnessed and how it is on the ground in Burkina Faso. So, brother, take it away. Let's see where we go today.
Absolutely. And to give some context, I traveled with my mentor and my teacher, Dr. Ama Mazama, through our organization, Afroentricity International. And this was actually the 11th convention, the 11th year. So for those who are not familiar with Afroentricity International, it's been around since 2011, but I joined the organization and I was introduced in 2016 when I was still a graduate student at Temple's Africology African American Studies program. It was around the time when I met my mentor, Dr. Ama Mazama. The previous year, I had met her at the Sheikh Anta Diop International Conference. And what really made me gravitate towards Parat Mambo Ama Mazama, and we call her the Parat, which is the leader of the organization, but also Parat in the Metanetra is the Great House. Also the title of the Nesobiti. This is the king of Upper and Lower Kemet. And many of the leaders of different chapters are called Shunutis. So once again, we were very intentional in terms of once again, ushering in what we call for African Renaissance, but also a United States of Africa, which is why we're so focused on economics, on politics, on education, spirituality, but also, once again, the social aspect of us really connecting with our African people. So this is why Afrocentricity as a paradigm and as an idea was important for us. As a theoretical framework is important for us because it gives us a framework to get our minds back. The first convention I went to was in Haiti. Dr. Mazama actually brought me back home to Haiti. I am also a victim of being Americanized. My family comes from a small town known as Lato Bonite in Haiti, but as many of us who are born in the United States, I've also drank the poison of the United States of murderers. So it's thanks to Afrocentricity that I was really able to get my mind back. Sadly, for many of us as young Black people, it usually takes us to go away for college to really delve deeply into this knowledge, unless you come from a community that really gives you that deep culture African foundation. So I just wanted to give that brief background because I think it's very important that we connect with these grassroots organizations. You know, it's not just enough for us to just travel. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people travel and then you end up being on these reservations or these tour sites. But whenever we travel with Afroentricity International, no, we always go with a Black-owned hotel and we're always on the ground with the people themselves. And we organize with the different chapters on the ground in those countries. So I really want to highlight Brother Sanu, Shanuti Sanu, who's the leader of the Burkina Faso chapter and within Afroentricity International. This is the chapter who organized the entire 11th convention along with Dr. Ama Mazama, as well as my sister Tamu Mazama, excellent leader, the next rising leader. And of course, she's going to be our future. I really mean that. Yeah, I just wanted to give her a quick highlight.
And you want to give the website where people can learn more about the organization and if they want to join. And just to be certain, because this is a public space, this is only for WanaUbuntu Africans, right? And true Africans who are grounded in Afrocentricity. So don't be going there to the website to join the organization if you're westernized and trying to accommodate Western ways. So what's the website, my brother?
So the website is currently being reorganized, but I could also drop the link. It's Diabukam, DYABUKAM.com. And then, of course, you're going to have comment index, and then you'll type Afrocentricity International. Sister Nduku, I could also send you the link. But right now, the website is down. Right now, it's being reworked.
Okay. So we can always add it to this recording later once everything is set up. Yeah, we'll wait. So if you're looking to learn more about it, just keep coming back to the recording and we'll have the information once they are ready to put it out. Okay.
And not only that, Afrocentricity International, they also have a Facebook and Instagram. Although we do have to return to our own social media platforms, especially those of you who are on the BB2Me, that's going to be very important moving forward. So we're not on their platforms. Mm-hmm. But you can also follow them on social media. Many of the chapters also have their own social media page. So please definitely type in Afrocentricity International if you have the social media of our colonizers.
Thank you. All right. So let's start from the top. How did this all begin? Why did you all decide to go to Burkina Faso?
Well, actually, my sister Tamu Mazama, who's the daughter of Ama Mazama, who's also my graduate advisor, also my spiritual mother and teacher, she reached out to me with the flyer stating that the next convention would be in Burkina Faso. And for me, this was a big moment because of what was going on with the Sahel states. Once again, the revolution launched by Mali, followed by Niger, and of course, Burkina Faso. And at first, I was a little intimidated. I was in the best financial position, so I didn't know whether I would be able to afford to go on this trip. I missed the convention last year, and I was depressed that I missed the convention in Gabon, which was a very spiritual moment for many of our chapter members. But this is something, I do have to make a mention of destiny, because oftentimes we are called to do certain work. And I felt there was a calling, there was a push telling me that I have to go on this trip. Mm. Yeah, it might put me in a little financial jam. Yeah, I might have to really put in a lot of work and effort to make get on this trip. Yeah, there might be barriers of people who will try to prevent me from traveling to Burkina Faso, particularly when many of those travel bans were being pushed. Nonetheless, we were vigilant, and everything worked out. And I really want to thank my sister Tamu Mazama, because she really poured into me and encouraged me to go on this trip. And I felt that if I didn't go on this trip, and Dr. Mazama also asked me, she wanted me to present on this conference, especially after my presentation in Senegal. She recognized that I had a power in my voice. Okay. I'm not the greatest public speaker, especially coming on being interviewed and going on these platforms. I'm very nervous. I'm the type to really be behind the scenes, and I'm honest, talking to you and letting you know my stance. But I also understand that for those of us who have a work, who have a calling, especially those of us who have the perspective and the knowledge and the memories of our ancestors and our people, we have work that we have to do, and we can't always hide and be behind the scenes.
No.
So I recognize that now.
Yeah, and thankfully we're not seeking perfection, right? We just want you to tell the story. We're not looking at the flaws. We're looking at the blessings we are getting right now as you speak to us about your direct experience of being in Burkina Faso. So let's do it as if we're doing an African story, as if we're sitting with the elder by the tree, by the fire, and just he's telling us the story of how it went. They arrived there, how you felt when you arrived there, what was the first thing you did, as the things you want to share with the wider community. And as we know, some of the things must remain within our community. But yes, go ahead, brother.
Absolutely. Well, I do have to make a brief mention of the process to get over there. So, of course, we flew out of JFK through Air Morocco. And I'm happy that Burkina Faso is also beginning the process of getting their own planes, because unfortunately, for many of us who want to travel to the Sahel, you have to travel to North Africa. So first you have to travel to Morocco, and then through their airlines, then you have to travel, then you can travel to those Sahel states, which is unfortunate. Once again, that is also another issue we're going to have to grapple with. But once again, I'm not going to ruffle any feathers for anybody who's Moroccan. That's another thing when we talk about certain Arab attitudes towards African people. But eventually, when we so once again, we had to have a long layaway, 10 hours in Morocco. And then from Morocco, eventually we were able to fly out to Burkina Faso, only a 3-hour flight, which wasn't bad. And when we landed around 2 p.m. But the minute you smell the air, just like when I smelled the air when I landed in Burkina Faso, in Benin. Benin was actually the first African nation that I went to in 2018. Yeah. So
I always say that
when you land in Africa, when you smell the air, when you can actually breathe, you can smell the soil, you can smell the earth. And there's no better feeling. And of course, those of you who never been to Ouagadougou, that city is, if you ever been to Accra, if you ever been to Dakar, it is very similar. It's a very beautiful city, very affluent city. And oftentimes there's a misconception. There's a conception that, African people, we don't have our own cities. We don't have our own industries, our own roads. It is a very beautiful city. I'm talking about clean roads, cars everywhere, stores, iPhone stores. Like you can find all that stuff in Africa. So all of you who are afraid to repatriate, you can find the things that here in the United States of murderers or France or any of these European nations, you can find the same thing over amongst our own people.
And that's important because the narrative that is put out is terrorists, villages, people who are not living well, and they're not showing the advancement. They're not showing that you can actually, and a lot of it also is to deter our brothers and sisters in the diaspora from going home. A lot of it is that, but also to justify the need for NGOs, right? The need for the white help. That's another reason why they put out that narrative, so that Africa can seem like a place that's always needing help. But no, we don't. We actually can build buildings. We actually can put up buildings that can forget even about matching the West, but are livable, that you can actually work in, you can make money in, because that's what people are worried about, right? Am I going to be able to have the internet? Am I going to be able to have an office? Do I have to worry about how I get to my office? No, there's a road that takes you from one place to another, unless you choose, like some of us, to live in the rural area. For peace. Go on, brother.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the first things I noticed just on that point is how hard people work. I'm talking about from the crack of dawn, once the sun rises, everybody's outside, everybody's working, everything's contributing to building their nation back up. It reminds me of what China said to the United States of murderers. China stated that, listen, your leader sold you out, sold your companies and your corporations and your factories to us. And we use those resources to build our people up, get them out of poverty. What you guys need is a revolution. And that's what you're seeing on the ground in Burkina Faso, a revolution where everybody is active. From the women, the children, from the elders, everyone is busy in whatever they do. Whether it's pumping gas, whether it's construction, whether it's selling t-shirts, selling water, or running your own grocery store. And one lesson that someone told me when we were on the ground, I believe it was the second day, and it was a very powerful statement. They mentioned how when a child is old enough, particularly the story of a son, they'll give them a business and they'll run that business and they won't help them. They'll let them fail, and the mother would shame them. And the main reason they shame that child is so that they would never fail again. Because once they restart their business and get back up on their feet, they will remember that shame and will never fail again. There's a reason why they call them the land of upright men or upright people. Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
One more story. I still remember we were traveling with one of our chapter members, one of the Shanutis of AIIT. Her name is Shanuti Sunya. And she didn't have a seat. And one of the Burkina Bay people got up and said, no, I'm a Burkina Bay person. I'm a land of upright person. I can stand. Let this elder sit down. Yeah. And it really shows you that the people really stand up and live by the name that Thomas Sankara gave them when he changed the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, a land of upright people. And from all the people I met there in that land, all the Burkina Bay people, they really live their lives with integrity. Yeah. And I respect them and thank them for just the hospitality and the genuineness they showed us as African people from the larger African world. I tend not to use diaspora for those who understand the term, but once again, those of us coming from the African world, the Burkina Bay people did embrace us and they recognize what's going on right now.
Yeah. And a few lessons there you're teaching that I want to touch on, right? You're teaching the whole upright man thing, like being upright, being having integrity. That is an obvious lesson for those of you who didn't hear that one. But then two others, the mother and how the mother deals with a child who has failed. The way the West looks at failure, right? But then in the West, even with the way they look at failure as something that we should not invite, right? Instead of a moment to learn and grow from the lessons you get from failure. Failure is important. Failure is necessary for you to grow and become a better self. It is necessary. So, but the mother here, it's, oh, honey, you're a winner. It doesn't matter. You're still a winner. So for you as a child, you grow up with all this failure and still see yourself as a winner. So you never say, what lessons did I learn? How do I need to improve? Because you're a winner, right? Which is wrong. The shaming, which we walk away from, which the West tells us is the wrong way to treat our children, is to make you understand that this is not where you're going. As much as failure is good so that you can learn lessons, this is not what you want. And therefore, don't be happy about this moment. Give yourself a little pressure so that you can work hard. Iron sharpens iron, right? Let me scrub you just a little bit so that you can shine better and you can be stronger. Let me put you back in the heat so that you can be stronger. That African concept is very important. And we must walk away from the Western culture of babying and pampering our children when it does them no good. Look at the evidence is in the children we have now in the community. That's where the evidence is. If you look around, those of you who are in the schools, the evidence is clear that this idea of telling them they're winners every time is not working. This idea of patting them in the back and giving them kisses is not working. That doesn't mean you don't show your children love. It just means let's be real about how you performed, my dear son and daughter. This is not where you're going and you need to improve. The other lesson is the people of Burkina Faso taking on the well-being of their community onto each and every one, right? Thinking as in terms of community, not self. In the United States, oh, I'm good. You take care of yourself. I'm good. I'm good. Right? Yeah, right? We're good. I don't know what you're talking about. We're good. I'm good. But there it's no. We're all not good if someone takes out Ibrahim Traoré. We're all not good if we don't start working to improve our economy. So that concept of community, and it's your responsibility. You don't have to be paid for it. Yes. You don't have to get credit for it. You do it to improve your community, not to get credit or to be paid. Brother, go on.
Absolutely. In fact, on that point, we met. This was actually a surprise. The last day before we left, Dr. Mazama had a surprise for us, and we went back to the memorial for Thomas Sankara, and we got to meet the brother of Thomas Sankara, Valentin Sankara. And Valentin Sankara confirmed what many of us felt, that Ibrahim Traoré is the second coming of his brother. And in fact, one of our chapter members, Wahida, who's house from Nigeria, she actually asked him about why, where did Thomas Sankara get his deep respect for women? And he took time to really explain his stance. He said, my brother was the best of us and really was a man of integrity. And he stated that his brother saw all the women in his family, how much, and also in the country, and saw how the women did everything. Me and Brother Nwari, we were talking earlier, how, a lot of our sisters, even yourself, Sister Ndugu, you guys wear multiple hats. You could do 12 things at the same time. And it actually reminds me of Asar, Aset, and Haru. When Asar is spreading civilization, when he leaves ancient Kemet, who does he leave to rule the nation? Aset, her name literally means the throne. So when he broke that down, it gave me a deep appreciation of Thomas Sankara's contribution. He also mentioned one incident in terms of when the French introduced the brothels and the sex work, and many women had to engage in prostitution. So he mentioned when he wanted to do away with prostitution and how some women would engage in that work. And he met with all the women and asked, why are you guys still doing this type of work? And for many of them, they were starving and they were very desperate. So then he took time to see what are your skill sets? What do you like to do? One woman said she knows how to cook. Another woman said she knows how to do hair. And then he made sure he got them products, gave them an institution so they could start their own businesses. Once again, this was an upright man. This was a military man. But also he allowed space so women could live their full lives and they can have agency. And understood that we cannot have an African liberation movement if we don't live in complementarity with our women. Yeah. It's a different stance compared to the West.
I also want to touch on that because you mentioned it. And sorry, this is how we're going to have the conversation. We'll go in and out, right? Because as our brother gives the lessons, I want to put a pin on them so that you all get them. Because I'm not going to assume that you can all hear what I'm hearing as far as the lessons being given. But that idea, I've been seeing a lot of headlines in the West, it's the military leader Traoré, the military leader Traoré, as if to take away from his qualifications to be a leader, just because he came in as a military man, right? As if to take away from that. When the United States has a clown for a leader, and they don't say the clown Trump, the clown Trump. Like, we don't have headlines that are saying, and to African outlets that have the kahunas to remain in an Afrocentric way, that is how you should start putting out the headlines. The clown President Trump, the clown, like, seriously, this is what they do to us. So let's start fighting back. So if you're going to devalue the legitimacy of our president because he's a military man and not acknowledge that he has the skills and qualities of a good leader, then how about we start showing you, America, you're behind. Let's put a mirror to your behind, because your pants are off and your behind is exposed. Right? Go on, brother.
Absolutely. I actually have to talk about the 2-day conference, because my presentation actually touched on that, especially a question from one of the students at Kizerbo University. For those who are not familiar with Joseph Kizerbo, even before Shake Out the Joke, he did take time to write the entire history of Africa. But we also know that Kizerbo was part of the opposite party from Thomas Sankara. So once again, they didn't have a good relationship. But nonetheless, a student asked a very good question, because my presentation was on ancestral memories of victory, since the theme of the conference is what should Africa look like now? Because once again, we're not talking about the past now. Yes, the past is important, but now what are the industries? What are the solutions that we're going to develop for ourselves? And that's what Burkina Faso is doing, as well as Mali and Niger, as an example for all of us in terms of AES. So one of the examples that I like to utilize, or rather the comparisons I like to make, is, of course, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Sankara, Ibrahim Traoré. And one of the students, she probably noticed it, but she asked the question, what are the similarities between those three men? One of the things is, yes, they're military men, but they didn't ask to be the leaders of their nations. The people chose them themselves. Dessalines did not want to be the emperor of IT. It is the people who asked him to become their emperor, to become their leader, and to defend the people. This is why he stated that the seat of emperor in IT, of the empire of IT, is not to be hereditary. It's not going to be passed down to my sons, because the seat of emperor is to be an avenger of all those people in IT, to be an avenger of the Ayisyen people, and all African people are suffering under enslavement. And Thomas Sankara had a similar stance when he once again had the agency to change the name of his country from Opa Volta to Burkina Faso, similar to Dessalines, to change the name of Saint-Domingue or Hispaniola to Haiti, the original name of the island, the land of high mountains, or spirit of the mountain. So once again, we understand that if we have a high memory of the past, we understand that there's nothing new under the sun. We understood that it's no surprising that Sankara's spirit comes back in Ibrahim Traoré, because the ancestors will give us truth and justice if we are in tune. Much like the memory in a computer that has high memory operates at its best performance. Us as African people, we have to do the same. We must have a high memory of our history and culture, of our leaders, the best examples. That's the notion of Sankofa, a Tuya Khan term. Once again, not just to go back and fetch it, not just to go back into the past and fetch anything from the past. We go back to the past to grab the best examples, the best aspects of our past, to build the foundations today, to build a better future. Because I did talk about what John and Beatty called Sasa and Zamani. When we talk about Sasa, the memories from those still alive in terms of the past or the immediate present, as well as the potential future. But Zamani, the memories of those ancestors who are no longer alive, memories that of people we may not even remember, but that is our limitless past, because time is forever. Time is eternal. It's cyclical, almost like a cycle. Once we understand that, once we understand our power and the proper leaderships, that we will never be fooled. We will never be moved off our foundations. We will continue to move with integrity, but also we'll know how to deal with our enemies.
And that's great that you mentioned that. Two things there. So the language and the importance, and you and I have had this conversation, yes, where we've talked about, I've said to you, I believe our liberation lies in the evidence in our linguistics. But Sasa and Zamani are two Kiubuntu words, Kiswahili, like I said before. Sasa is now. and zamani, as you're saying it. And I never thought this before, but now that I'm intentional about how I'm seeing things, I hear it. Zamani. So za usually means of, and it's many. So I will now go back and do the work that I need to do to understand the etymology of that word, zamani. What is mani? What does it stand for? So that we can understand the deeper meaning in that. But I agree, we have to intentionally go back with intention, go back with intention to pick up what's good and use it now, improve it and use it now to grow, but also to learn the lessons from the mistakes, right? One of the things we hear people attacking us with is Black people sold Black people too. Okay, so let's agree that they did. How do we need to fix that? No more doing that. If you do that, these are the consequences, right? We learn from our mistakes so that we can be better people, like I said. Take our failures, get the lessons from them, and grow from them. Go on, brother.
Absolutely, sister. Especially how to deal with your traders. You know, we went to the memorial hearing about Compaoré. For those who don't know about Compaoré, once again, someone who was raised by Thomas Sankara's father, also went to military school with Thomas Sankara, this right-hand man, to be betrayed by your own. And just to hear and I'm not going to describe how they betrayed Thomas Sankara, particularly in the memorial. We do have an image, and that's the exact outfit he wore when he was assassinated. But oftentimes when we hear the level of betrayals of those who would betray their own just for a simple dollar or to appease the white power structures, is absolutely disgusting. And once again, we have to recognize that not all skin folk are kinfolk. We do have to recognize that there are many of our people who have different ideologies or who might have a European mind, hence why Frantz Fanon was important. He did that book, Black Skin, White Mask. He did a deep psychological analysis on his own mind and how he had to kill the white person within. Even with myself, I like to say that even though I have my doctorate, I'm a student for life because I don't know anything.
We all have the white person within. We, all of us who have been under this miseducation system, all of us have the white person within. Now we need to identify it so that we can remove it. Just like the exorcist, we need to exercise the white person within and remain purely African. No, for real. Go on.
Oh no, it's a constant work, and for instance, I don't run my own institution, so that's why platforms like yours, Sister Nduku, platforms like a BB Tumi with Obemfo Kabone, these are important because once again, if I'm being honest, I still work on a plantation, academic plantation. You know what I mean? So many of us who call ourselves doctors work in these spaces. We have to recognize that, and but also, what you mentioned about language is important. One thing I noticed in Burkina Faso, and that's one thing they're begin the process of removing French, but it is challenging because in Ouagadougou, there's one dialect amongst the Masi people, but also in Bobo Dialasso, in Bobo, they have their own indigenous dialect. So these are two different languages between two different cities. So once again, you can imagine the challenges of trying to find one common indigenous African languages for all the people to speak in Burkina Faso, especially with the larger diaspora. Of course, many of us will lean towards Kiswahili for obvious reasons, especially once you see the amount of different African people who speak Kiswahili or Twi or any of the other languages that we might gravitate towards. But once again, that is going to be a deeper discussion because remember, when you speak another language, you have a different way of thinking, a different psychology. Ayisyen Creole, sadly, I was Americanized being born in the U.S., so I'm a victim in terms of me losing my mother tongue. And I had to return, especially once, again, I delved back into my own history and culture as an African person from IT. So we all have to do the same thing. It's not easy. It's going to require a lot of work, but also the best way to learn a language is to be in the community amongst the people themselves. That is the best way to learn any language when you're in a community of speakers. So we also have to create communities now. Yeah. And in fact, one colleague mentioned of just establishing a school where different people in the diaspora, if we could imagine this, if we had a platform where we could attend school with Burkina Faso people and we're learning each other's languages. Imagine what sort of dynamics that will create if they're able to go to school from kindergarten until high school together and we're learning each other's languages as well as cultures. Because I do state that African people on the continent also have to learn the struggles of African people here in the United States, especially with how we understand race. That sort of coalition is going to be very important for us to really understand and get at the root of this issue of global white supremacy.
I'm glad you mentioned that because Kumbukeni is moving intentionally that way. Myself, WanaUbuntu, the organization that we started, which is where we build community, that is intentionally our purpose, to connect the two through knowledge of each other. through understanding of each other, because that was my personal journey, right? When I started communing with our brothers and sisters here and understanding the journey that they've been through, I was more aware of the system of oppression to us all and the similarities between it here and there, especially when I look at the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, the Mau Mau and the Black Panther Party and all these connections that they're influenced by them, right? That they literally have a Mau Mau in Harlem. Is it Harlem or where they had it? Like, for real. The connections are there. So we must stop listening to the white man. There was something else too, you said, the languages. Yes, the struggle with Burkina Faso, it's been done before. So I say to Burkina Faso, look towards Kenya. I say to Ibrahim Traoré, look towards Kenya and see what they did. In Kenya, we have multiple nations speaking different languages, but our language of unity in Kenya is Kiubuntu Kiswahili. And that is the thing that when we come together, we all speak that. Like even in the groups that are Kenyan, we agree, okay, in the group that is for all Kenya, we don't speak the other languages, we speak Kiswahili. But all of us still embraced our languages. And Kenya every year, in August or December, I'm forgetting because it's been a while since I left high school, they have a festival where all the nations come and represent their culture in dance and music and everything. So as much as the Kenyan government moved, so we cannot take away, right, from the good things about these people, despite the fact that they are neo-colonialists. As much as the government said, we're going to have one language that is our official language, this is our national language, we're going to operate under this language, right? Kiubuntu Kiswahili. They still honored all the other nations and their languages. I still learned Kikamba. I was able to speak it. And because I was interacting with my brothers and sisters from other communities, I learned Kikuyu because I was going to school with Kikuyu people, right? There's no shame on who you are and your language. There's embracing and wanting to be a part of each and every one of us. So Burkina Faso, you can do it. Go on, brother.
Absolutely. And I do have to mention also the clothes in terms of their industry with the Danfani. And of course, I'm wearing the fabric that I had made because, and of course, I'll talk about Basoloma Beze, the president of AES, who also once again welcomed us and also took time to build with us. But when you look at just their textile industry alone, and once again, this is an image of the president of AES for those who are not familiar. Yes, of course, you have the presidents of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but the president of the actual AES is Basoloma Beze. And once again, I apologize if I mispronounced his name. But once again, I do want to honor him because not only did he attend the conference, we wanted him to attend. We had a 2-day conference for the 11th convention of Afroentricity International. We actually had the Naba of the Masi people who also attended. But also, once again, the president of AES who attended the second day. He couldn't make it the first day because he had several important meetings he had to engage with. But he took time to attend the second day of the conference. And after the second day, our last day of the conference, he actually invited us to his office. And once again, took time to explain much of their conflicts, their history, their current issues and struggles. And we also gave a donation to many of the soldiers who are lost because many of them are still fighting the terrorists in the north. So that reality is also something that we have to recognize. He wanted to see if we could arrange a meeting with Ibrahim Traoré, but we have to also recognize that Ibrahim Traoré's life has been threatened numerous times, more than 11. So once again, he constantly has to be on the move. But I will tell you this, the people do not play about him. In terms of the citizen watch we saw along with the soldiers, in terms of the youth, because we visited a school, and there's an interesting story about the school we visited. One of our chapter brothers, Sanu, we mentioned how that school didn't have there's a big wall gate. And he's mentioned that a few years ago, that wall is not present. Apparently, Ibrahim Traoré was driving in Ouagadougou one day, it was in Bobo. He was driving in Bobo and noticed that there was no wall to protect the children from any attacks. So therefore, he met the director and gave a whole bunch of a whole bunch of money and said, listen, you're going to build a wall to protect these children. Not only that, you're also going to distribute some of this wealth amongst your teachers and instructors. Sometimes you'll have over 1,000 children or over 10,000 children with over 500 kids in a classroom with 2 teachers. So once again, he truly cares about the youth. He truly cares about the children. Because sadly, we heard the story of the director. Apparently, he didn't disseminate the money to his instructors. So when Ibrahim Traoré found out, he sent the police to lock him up. This is a man who stands on business and on principles. So he does not play about the children. He does not play about his people. So much so that I sent Sister Nduku a video that unfortunately I can't share because I care about the children. There's certain things that I don't want to share on these platforms. But literally, you'll see the children chanting Ibe, Ibe, Ibe. So once again, these are youth who at that level understand the importance of this man.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Langley here wants to spout lies saying this man is a terrorist. How can this man be a terrorist when you have children nearly at the age of 5 chanting his name, praising him? Much like how we did with Papa Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines in IT. We cannot lose this man. A man who truly cares about the people and is doing work, but also checking the corruption in his country. I wish we had something like this in the United States of murderers, but you can't expect to have a proper leader in a nation that's not proper itself.
Yeah. And just to add to that, for those of you, because we saw a piece from a sister in South Africa, I talked about it before, where she was calling Ibrahim Traoré a dictator and following the Western way of putting out these narratives against our leaders who stand by us and by the well-being of their people. Sometimes it's necessary to be a dictator if you're changing your people. Sometimes dictatorship for the well-being of your people is welcome. I welcome it. And it's time for us all. Yep.
I don't even call it a dictatorship. Ibrahim Traoré states specifically, we're not doing a democracy, we're doing a revolution.
Thank you. Let's call it that, a revolution, right? Revolution. A different way of seeing things, a different way of operating is necessary sometimes because our people, talking about our people being sick with the Western mind, Western mentality. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about our people. You said yourself, the brothels in Burkina Faso were introduced by the French. So was corruption. For anyone who is going to repeat the Western concept of we are suffering because of corruption, shut your mouth. Who brought the corruption? Before you speak about we are suffering because, ask yourself, who brought the corruption? Who brought that mindset of sucking from your people instead of feeding your people, instead of serving your people? Who brought that mindset? The Western mind brought that mindset. The Western man, right? The white man brought that mindset. So he has to be on point. He has to be disciplined. If you are messing, I literally gave you money and said specifically to you, use it this way for the well-being of this school, and you didn't listen. Oh, let me show you how you're not going to repeat it ever again, that mistake. You're going to have some consequences so that you never do it again. And if you can share some of the other stories too that you shared, because
I have another one that I'm gonna bring up just now because I have a good one now.
And it's interesting because I'm confusing my conversations with you with my conversations with one of the generals. So that story was told by the general, but because I had reached out to this general about what the lady had put out, and they said, no, this is why this was done. So there's context. There's context as to why he put these people in prison. He jailed them. He put them away because they were harming community. And it is necessary to put away people who are harming community if you're building community and if you're grounded by the well-being of community. So go on, brother. Listen.
Absolutely. But that's also why he has to protect himself, because one thing that President Bazet mentioned is that you also have to watch out for the people within. People who are jealous, people who just want to take his seat. So, that's a reality that they also recognize.
Exactly.
I want to mention once again another example of how he deals with corruption. For instance, another thing the French established is sugarcane fields. And he mentioned that in the past, before he seized power, much of that sugarcane would be exported to France, and then they'll give us and they would send back the raw white sugar that was killing the people. Once again, intentionally to kill the people. So yes, they get the raw pure sugarcane, where the people get the diluted white sugar that's once again not good for your health. And he once again seized the entire field and said that we're not exporting this to France. This is our own sugar. We're going to produce our own sugar, and we're going to take back our resources. So once again, this is a man who's standing on business, who's empowering his nation. So much so that if you look at their juice industry in terms of mango, that blew up in terms of when I went to the supermarket. And then I saw, once again, shout out to African Stream and Acapello. I saw them make a post about it. So once again, I was like, yo, I'm really drinking the same juice that they just posted about. When you look at their tomato industry in terms of food security, which is one of the major concerns, once again, why is it that we're importing all this food when we could once again produce everything we need? We have everything we need. Shea butter, once again, another raw resources that they produce, because we had a spiritual ceremony in which some of that raw shea butter was also utilized. Also utilized for spiritual bath, but we also know the benefits of shea butter. So once again, Africa has everything it needs in terms of food. And mind you, the amount of trees that he's also still planting. Initiative also started by Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara planted over 300,000 trees. So literally when we're traveling
Green Belt,
you see them planting trees. I've never seen so many trees in Bobo. Ouagadougou, they're still, in the process. I would say Ouagadougou, you'll see more of the industries. But once again, when you want to see that complementarity with nature, travel to Bobo. Bobo is that city really resonated with my spirit in terms of, once again, their attention to, once again, living complementarity with nature. But also, once again, the developments in technology. I did see a hospital the Chinese also built. But I also want us to recognize that it's not necessarily a friend, and I don't always use the word ally, and don't confuse an ally with a friend, but a partnership. And we have to recognize that they can easily become our enemies. So we have to be very suspicious with Russia and China. But understand that Russia and China did not have the same interaction with Africa as the other European Western powers. One book that is helpful for any of our audience members is by Chuezu Ibikwe. That really helped me a lot when I picked up this book a few years ago. It's called The West and the Rest of Us. And if you read that first chapter, it really shows you how we got into this place of how Africa is constantly being exploited, but also what the Western powers did. How was France, Great Britain at the time, or what we currently call the UK, how would even the United States, how were they able to become the world powers that they were? And of course, the US is in the same position it was in the past, especially with the current war. But once again, as African people, we have to recognize that there are certain things that aren't necessarily our fight, but also we have to pay attention to the geopolitics of the world. And we have to prepare ourselves. There's a reason why the AES is preparing itself right now. I'll leave that note there.
I'm running to get the link for that book, so I'll put it up once we finish. Talk about visiting, and then we'll go back to other. Talk about visiting. So now they have, see, I'm thinking about so many things at the same time. I just remembered they celebrated African Spirituality Day. So let's put a pin on that one. You'll talk about it. But talk about your visit to the Thomas Sankara monument and memorial that now Burkina Faso is honoring him. And for those of you who've listened to Kumbukeni broadcast before, when Thomas Sankara was killed, intentionally they buried him in a dishonorable way, where it is said that even his hand was sticking out of the ground. So in African culture, you're buried so that the dogs will not eat you. So that the animals will not eat you, because that's honor, right? So that your flesh can decay in peace and in an honorable way. So if you're left out, that's dishonor, right? Because you will be eaten by animals. And sometimes because you can't avoid it, it's war. There's ways of mitigating such a situation. But intentionally, by an African man, he was buried in a dishonorable way. And Ibrahim Traoré and the architect, I mentioned him before, the place was built by a Burkina Faso architect. It wasn't just built by anyone, but a Burkina Faso architect. And I'll mention his name again when I'll go and get his name. But talk about that experience.
That experience was powerful. And we went twice. The first time just for the regular tour. And what shocked me was that in 2019, the monument wasn't really fully in place. A memorial wasn't in place yet. So the fact that when we arrived in 2025, that it's functional, and so many people, so many Burkina Bay people, I'm talking about the school trips, seeing busloads of children, Burkina Bay children, community members, parents, other youth, taking pictures with Thomas Sankara. And you can see the power of this ancestral site, of this memorial. And you can see how the people, once again, really gravitate towards it and how it resonates with their spirits. So much so that I even saw colonizers coming out there. Yeah, I saw some, I don't know if they were French, but yeah, I even saw some colonizers out there. So probably just 1 or 2 or 3. So, you usually know when our colonizers are out there because there's not many of them. That's the other thing about going back home when you're around more of your people. It's like a psychological click just goes off in your head. Like when you recognize, like, oh, shoot, I haven't seen any white folks. So that's important to recognize as well.
That is real. That is real. I'll quickly tell without taking you away from the story. When I went home in 23 and I was luxuriating in that reality, right? Until I came back and I had to go back to work the next day. and I went to the subway and it was all, I was like, why the hell am I around white people? Why? Like, I need to go back home, but go on.
Absolutely. And of course, they have the memorial inside, so you can't take pictures inside. You can take pictures outside, and they have some amazing pictures of Thomas Sankara, as well as not just Thomas Sankara, but also his 11 to 12 companions, to honor, once again, many of his compatriots who also fought with him. So it's not just for Thomas Sankara, it's also for his compatriots who fought along him to lead the Burkina Faso people to independence. So that stance was important, especially their images, which are also shown on the monument. But also inside, we poured a libation to honor his spirit and his legacy. And once again, the Burkina Faso people who organized that memorial, as well as the event, as well as once again, I have to honor Valentine Sankara for also meeting with us before we left and invite us back to the memorial. So once again, this is a major institution they established, and it's something that's going to once again instill the memory of the people. And once again, she did once again mention the architect Francis Kéré. And I do want to highlight the architect because that's very important. Unlike Senegal with the African Renaissance statue, I do love the Renaissance statue, but remember that was built by Koreans, and we have to recognize that we have to move towards a position where we no longer allowing foreigners to build our ancestral monuments. We need to be building our own monuments to honor our ancestors, important figures who died for our liberation.
And there is something to be said on that regarding African spirituality, why it must be us, because of the connection we have with the ancestors. You're calling upon this ancestor as you build him or her, right? You're bringing their energy, and them being there is going to also bring the energy that they represented, the culture, the principles they represented constantly into the community, as long as that remains there. So it cannot be done by foreigners. There's a block. When the foreigner does is you're blocking the communication between that ancestor and the us who are here now. So it has to be done by us. Go on, brother.
Absolutely. And I do have to make a mention about spirituality and even religion, because yes, the majority of the population is Muslim, and you do have some Christians, but they still respect the traditional spiritual systems of the Burkina Faso people. So much so that the mountain and the site that we had to travel to, a particular catfish waterfall that's very sacred, even Ibrahim Traoré had to travel to that site to get spiritual protection. Yeah. So that's very important to recognize, and Ibrahim Traoré recognizes that. For him, notice that he doesn't use his religion as an excuse. Once again, he's Black, he's an African first, and he shows that. He understands that, we need to work towards our liberations. And once again, no matter what your religion is, we need to work in tandem with our own history and culture, which is why he respects the traditional African spiritual systems, especially when we travel to the museum that I mentioned to you to learn more about the Masi history and culture. There's one figure I want to mention is Yanenga. For those who are not familiar with Yanenga, she's a warrior princess and the daughter of King Nagabiwa. He was the king in present-day northern Ghana, but once again, we understand that he's a Mande hunter. And once again, she's integral as a Dagomba princess. She's integral to the Masi history and culture. For those who are not familiar with the Masi people, they're the largest ethnic population in Burkina Faso. So for me, it was informative just to learn about this figure, because I wasn't familiar with Yanenga, and her story is a warrior princess. So there was a lot that I learned in Burkina Faso, just amongst the people themselves and their own traditional history.
There's so much. So you walked in and you couldn't take pictures. I've seen some of them from people who could, right? Just because of the level of traveling they were doing. So tell us the things you saw in that space that showed Sankara was a Pan-African. I'm being specific, but I want you to say it. Like, what did you see on the wall that showed you this man was an African, and he did not have ego? He was okay with uplifting other warriors, other ancestors. Yes, please speak on that.
Absolutely. Part of the reason is, of course, I mentioned the Damfani. He would wear his African clothes. He would wear his fabric. In fact, one story was told by his brothers that his brother had a sense of humor. So there'll be certain holidays where some days he'll dress like a Muslim or dress like this. Once again, just break the ice amongst the people. So once again, that shows once again he was a person of community. He was an African person who understood the importance of community. But also, his brother mentioned it. He said it as a joke, but he mentioned how he's like, "Yo, you're president now, man. What's up? Hook me up." And he was like, "No, nah. Just because I'm president, I don't think I'm gonna be doing any favors." So that was important for me because once again, you have many leaders who try to do favors for their own family members, probably give them pardons, probably give them a bag. But once again, Sankara wasn't like that. He lived very humble. He didn't enrich himself or his family members. He enriched the people.
Yep.
Seeing that for me was actually a testament to his African character. So it wasn't so much of just what he was wearing, but more so his actions, how he moved.
Yeah. He lived what he talked about. He lived what he
walked that talk.
Yes, he walked that talk. He did. And there's a few instances of apparently him being in the crowd, and there's a young man who's wearing Levi jeans and him shaming him and being like, "Why are you wearing those jeans?" Like, and the fact that he made it clear again, you need to be revolutionary when you take on leadership in Africa now to move us towards liberation. The Africa that is intensely infected with Western culture, harmful Western culture. So to come in as a leader who's going to change that and cleanse that infection out of us and out of our motherland, you have to move a certain way. And that way will not be an easy pill for Africans to swallow at first, but they will appreciate it later. And I'm glad to hear that the Burkina people, but this is where you have to, as you commend Traoré for what he's doing, remember that he got a head start from Thomas Sankara. His people are more prepared to swallow this pill because of what Sankara did before, because they've seen it before. They've seen the 4 years of when we allowed our leader to do what was for us, this is what happened. And then when this clown, Kun, came in, this is what happened. And now that we have a chance again to get those 4 years from Sankara, we ain't moving in a way that is not intentional. We're not playing games. And this is what's happening in Burkina. Go on, brother.
No, absolutely. Valentin Sankara actually touched on that point when Compaoré was in power. Him and many of his family were under threat. So, I know that was a very emotional moment for him. And exactly what you stated, for him, it was a very important moment because unlike in the past, that was one of the questions from our members to him. What's different compared to the past? And he said, unlike the past, the people recognize the importance of Ibrahim Traoré when they didn't truly understand the importance of Thomas Sankara at that time. So because of what occurred to Thomas Sankara, the people won't make that same mistake again. And I'm adamant about that. They won't. When it comes to the Citizen Watch and how adamant and how tied to the current revolution they are, they won't make the same mistake again.
And for members of Kumbukeni, for the WanaUbuntu who are listening and those who will find this recording in the future, that includes us. That includes us. If you find out that there's someone who is posing a risk, who's going to threaten his life, do something about it wherever you are. Do something about it. That includes you. We are all now responsible for keeping Ibrahim Traoré alive and allowing him to have the resources and the strength and the spiritual peace to lead his people and to serve his people. So that responsibility is not just on the people of Burkina Faso. It's on all of us. So if you, as a Black person who has been reached out to covert entities, the CIA, the French ones, the English ones, MI5, MI6, and they say to you, hey, we want to give you a ticket to go to Burkina Faso so that you can do this. Say no, because it's your responsibility to protect the man. Do not go for the money. Say no. Because him being taken away is not just going to, it's not just about him, the individual being taken away. It's what's going to happen to the community and the larger African community, the global African community. So it is all of our responsibility. This morning, brother, sorry to go here before with the conversation. As I found out about the United States bombing Iran and understanding how selfish that action is, right? That these men who have the luxury and the resources to go hide in bunkers if we start getting bombed are flippantly making these decisions to put us at risk and under the threat of being bombed. So we're waking up wondering, okay, we're exposed. We can be bombed anytime today. If Iran has the capabilities or has a partner that has the capabilities and they decide we're done with the United States. We need to take care of this child that keeps annoying us, this wound that keeps not healing, we gotta take care of it. If they decide that, and that's a very huge possibility, all of us who are regular people, who don't have bunkers to hide to, who don't have planes that we can call to immediately that are bulletproof. We're at risk. And this is the mindset that we all need to get to. Instead of upholding these leaders who are not really for us, they're wealthy men who are for themselves, who make decisions just like that put us all at risk when they know they're not going to be affected by those. So again, responsibility and showing how the micro affects the macro. What is happening to Burkina Faso, it being a success, the well-being of the people continuing, the well-being of Sankara, Ibrahim, you know what? Ibrahim Traoré is 37. It's been 37 years since Sankara's death. Did you know that, brother?
Yes, I did.
So that we can.
Sankara noticed that too. That's why he calls him the second coming of his brother. It came straight from his mouth. I was saying it before, but when we asked him, he said, "You know what? I say the same thing. I always say that my brother's spirit returned in Ibrahim Traoré, and it's undeniable."
Yeah. So whether you're in the Caribbean, in the US, you're in Kenya, you're in South Africa, you're in Nigeria, what is happening in Burkina Faso is all of our responsibility, and we must protect it. And then we must expand it to other places. Go on, my brother.
Absolutely, sister. And just on that point, for those who are paying attention to the dynamics in the world right now, what the West is trying to attempt, or Yurugu, for those who read Marimba Ani, we understand that as Sealy, in terms of the enemy. What they're attempting to do is similar to what they're doing to my country in IET. And Valentin Sankara also mentioned that. Once again, they have a large appreciation for the Ayisyen people. So all my Ayisyens, the Burkina Bay people love us. They actually know some of our songs. But once again, what they have done in Congo, in Sudan, in IET is what they're attempting to do to all of our nations as African people. And we have to recognize what they call forever wars in terms of having eternal conflict and chaos so they can enrich themselves. That is what they want. And until we recognize that, until we truly return to ourselves and empower our other brothers and sisters and fight the enemy, then we will continue to empower them. We will continue to support them, whether we want to intentionally or not. I always like to say that the United States of Murderers is a prison. It is a prison. In fact, I was so depressed coming back. Of course, before a lot of us had fears of traveling, they try to, do these travel bans to discourage you from traveling. And usually they want to, scare you by saying they're going to check phones when you come back. Let me tell you, when I came back to JFK, and nobody was checking my phone. 1, 2, 3.
I literally had the opportunity to go, brother, and that's like, we can talk about that later. Let's keep talking, please.
So I say that stating, do not be consumed by fear. They've been trying to instill us with fear for how many centuries now? And we know the game that's they're playing, and guess what? They're not winning. When we look at European society, or rather United States of Murderers, they're on the verge of collapse, of their own doing. This is not an accident of history. There's nothing new under the sun, as I always tell my students. But now the question is, what are we going to do? Are we truly going to organize? Or are we truly going to build while they're fighting amongst themselves? And yes, many of us will suffer due to their war. As it was in the past, it will be the same today.
Yeah. The thing I was going to say before was I thought to myself this morning to put out a post to say any Black person out there who's asked to fight for America, do not fight for America. Like, let's not do this anymore. Do not be a part if you can. I understand this is your income, this is your livelihood, your children and everything, but let's stop being a part of this murdering internationally. This is not me not being a patriot. I have no business being a patriot. Like that. This is not about that. For those of you who come for us, for all that other nonsense, and I call it nonsense because it doesn't make sense. What makes sense for me as a Black person, given how these entities are operating against Black people, is to have this stance. That's what makes sense. What doesn't make sense is for me, now that I know what I know, to join the American military and fight for them. That doesn't make sense.
And I understand, I had a student too in the past who ended up joining the military. I tried to discourage him, and but I understand some join because they're looking for resources. The military chooses those who are deeply impoverished, who have no opportunities. So many of them end up joining the military because they give them some level of socialism. They might give them housing, food. But guess what? What are you going to end up sacrificing?
Brother, this is why you will find their recruiting offices in the hood. You will not find them in good neighborhoods.
That's right.
You will never see a military recruiting office in a good neighborhood. Never. A white neighborhood. Never. you will find them in Black neighborhoods. I know one in Bloomfield. You will find them in Newark. You will find them in Black neighborhoods and Hispanic.
In Brooklyn, really, one of my students from Brooklyn got recruited. And, you know, he had to leave near the end of the semester. He was taking my course, Haitian Revolution, then and now. And, you know, I'm not going to tell a student what not to do. But, you know, I sort of try to give him some warnings. So I'm hoping he's okay. But, you know, this was the reality I didn't want him to face that we're dealing with now. So you're absolutely correct, sister. And for some of our youth, some of them are so desperate and come from, once again, the hood or those type of environments where that's their way out. Just like for some of us where school is my way out. You know what I mean? So it's complicated. So, you know, I don't want this to seem like we're bashing soldiers. But once again, you have to be critical of the United States of murderers. You have to be critical of the empire.
Yes. So it's interesting. What we're doing is informing our people. We're shining a light onto how the system is working, right? Not necessarily bashing soldiers, for those of you who are confused and who have limited critical analysis skills. So what we're doing is shining a light on how this system works to enslave you and put you in compromising situations where you're acting against your own interests and against your community's interests. So it's not necessarily about and the thing that you don't understand is that bad neighborhood, that impoverished neighborhood, has been intentionally caused by the system. There's a show, I forget what it was, on HBO that clearly shows this, because sometimes we revolutionaries move away from watching these shows, but some of them are very telling. And it's showing the Chinese coming as immigrants and them being villainized and being put in camps. And then there's chaos in the community, there's gangs and all that. There's Black gangs, there's white gangs, there's Chinese gangs. And when the people running the community, the mayor and the businessmen, sit in the office.
Warrior, I know what you're talking about.
Right?
Yes,
I think that's what it is.
In San Francisco, yes.
When they're talking and they're like, some of the people are like, man, there's chaos. We need to do something about it. He's like, nah, chaos is good for business. They actually cause the chaos for business. Yes. So we have to understand that bad neighborhood has been intentionally created so that you end up being the labor force for the military. Go on.
And also connected to Burkina Faso, guess who's funding those terrorists?
The French.
I'm not going to call them out. Actually, yeah, I am going to call them out. So when we talk about France, United States of murderers, once again, these are the same entities funding many of those terrorists.
Yeah, it was proven the last attempt on his life, the one that happened in May, I believe it was, that they were funded by the US.
Absolutely.
That was Go on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to share one book. Let me just grab this book. One book. That's actually very helpful. If you truly want to understand the malice from many of these figures who we're talking about, you need to read White Malice. This is a book written by Susan Williams, The CIA and the Covert Recolonization of Africa. If you truly want to understand the forces that we're dealing with, oftentimes these forces are invisible. If you read Michael Tilson, Invisible Jim Crow, in terms of what's been done to African American people. But once again, when we talk about the levels of attacks, it is not innocent and it is very intense on so many levels. So these forces are not easy to unpack. I do want our people to recognize what entities we're dealing with, which is why I also tend to move in silence oftentimes, where I don't post a lot or do videos or even interviews. But for my sister Nduku, this is an important platform for us to like really talk about why this work is important. And once again, this work isn't for the faint of heart. There's not a lot of money in this work. It's not a lot of support. Oftentimes you will feel isolated. Yes, we do have our own communities, but oftentimes some of us are in different cities. People, spread apart, and it can be very isolating, which is why those of us from our perspective recognize that America is a prison. For us, it's a slow death. Those of you who have your distractions, yeah, many of you are still entertained or trapped in the quote-unquote matrix. But, this is why we take what we do seriously. And I say this with a lot of passion because I'm a victim. I still am a victim, but I was a victim of these levels of attacks in terms of distractions or drinking that quote-unquote good American poison. So I understand now, now that I've been introduced to and returned to ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Whew, brother. I'm looking at a couple of the pictures you sent, and I'm gonna put them up. So talk about engaging with the community there, how they saw you, right? What happened as you sat with them? Did you feel as an outsider sitting with them? How did you feel when you sat with our brothers and sisters in Burkina Faso?
No, I felt like family, and eventually some people will recognize that you're a foreigner, especially it's not hard to tell because some of us are gonna have a lighter complexion, and not only that, once you speak, that's when people are gonna recognize, oh, you from the United States, from this region. Usually people don't know where you are. Sometimes people think I'm Fulani or I might be Yoruba or Fon, when they see you, because most people are gonna base. When they look at you, especially if you're a black person, they're not going to know where you're from until you speak. So that's why I state that. Some people are going to assume that you're part of a particular ethnic group, which is also very powerful to see, which is why I travel, challenge our brothers and sisters to travel, because who knows, you might end up, doing finding more about your ancestry, you know what I mean? Especially based on your phenotype. So you'll be surprised how people might describe you. Yeah. But it was very welcoming. Although, yes, there might have been some of the youth who might have thought we had a whole bunch of money. So, yes, you'll see some youth who might try to come up to you, ask for money. And usually I don't give money because I don't want them to be beggars. People are not beggars. And you shouldn't be begging anybody for anything. And that's, once again, a trend that the West tries to make us engage in. I know even when I go back home to Haiti or Benin or Jamaica, that's that tourism nonsense. So, but for the most part, the people are very respectful, very welcoming. Sure, of course, there are going to be some who might frown based on, usually I like to dress as the people dress. So which is why, I tend to buy their fabric. I like to come as they are. Yeah. I don't usually like to dress as an American. That's not my thing. Even when I'm back home, I like us to be our own authentic African selves if we can. And usually I try to meet the people where they're at. So that's my best approach. But there's no negativity. I didn't receive any disrespect, and that's important too in terms of what people call the diaspora wars. We have to travel. My people, get off social media. You need to travel and meet people where they're at. Yeah. I would say going back, Dr. Mazama take me to go back home to IT because many of my parents also wouldn't let me go back home because they were afraid of kidnapping or their internal beefs with family members or people back home. Do not be afraid to connect back to your ancestral lands. Go back home. Go be amongst other African people because it will change your framework. A lot of times my only perspective was just coming out of New York. I was in New York the majority of my life and then Philadelphia for 5 years, working on my doctorate. So once again, it was important for me to travel outside the United States. Definitely travel throughout the United States because understand that there are certain regions, whether you're talking about East Coast, West Coast, the South, there are different dynamics, especially even amongst language, amongst African people themselves, African American people, especially if we talk about Ebonics. That's a language in itself. The way someone talks in Baltimore is going to be different from someone from New York or Philly. So it's the same thing when we talk about people and the people's cultures. African people were the very diverse group of people, but we're very similar. No matter where you travel, whether Jamaica, whether Burkina Faso, Benin, Haiti, somewhere in the South throughout the United States, you're going to notice certain similarities of African people.
Exactly.
Especially when we went to, there was in Ouagadougou, there was local artists. And they had an event, a theater event, and they had a performance. I was like, dang, man, this reminds me of back home. It reminds me of like when we back in our hood, somebody doing a performance or doing a show, and they're dancing, break dancing, or they're doing a performance. And I was like, yo, this is something that's consistent everywhere I travel.
We are one people.
We are people of spirit, and we're vibrant, and we introduce so much aspects of culture. Mm-hmm. And if we recognize how similar we are, despite the language barriers, imagine how powerful we can be. This is Garvey's vision in terms of establishing the UNIA. And I have to also honor the Amy Ashwood and Amy Jacques Garvey. Once again, those women were integral. He didn't start the UNIA by himself. So once again, Garvey not only wanted to empower the African nation, African continent, our motherland, but he understood that when the continent's empowered, our network of African people, our network of other Black nations will also be empowered. Because when we become a global power, nobody can mess with us. That is the intention, which is why, once again, the partnership with Russia in terms of getting those nuclear plants is ideal. Because once again, yes, sometimes you have to make certain deals or partnerships if you're dealing with a common foe. It was like that for those who are familiar with the history of IT and the Ayisyen revolution. There's one point where we sided with the Spanish to kick out the French, and then it was time for the Spanish to get that work. Then the French got that work again, and we also took out the British. So once again, an ally or a partnership doesn't necessarily mean they're your friend. And we always have to recognize that.
Strategic partnership for the need at the moment, right? Currently, we have a need. We have a greater enemy China is moving differently. Russia is moving differently. We engage with them, strategic relationships, partnerships for the need at the moment, right? They have the resources, they have the skills. So, but this is a serious understanding, Russia and China. We are calling you for this purpose. Do not make a mistake and do this that the West does, because immediately you do that, this relationship is broken and there will be consequences. That's how we need to move, right? You want access, and the minute we see you behaving in a way that we haven't agreed, the access is taken away from you. There have to be consequences. But I was going to say quickly, brother, and I kept this picture intentionally. For those of you who are looking to travel home and you always complain, oh, they treated me different, it's because you're dressing differently. All right, you are the same. Our skin, our bodies are showing we are the same. But if you come with that Western dressing style, you are showing, yes, you're showing that you're embracing that more than the African. So I will tell you, as much as it seems superficial, that movement from dressing intentionally as African is important towards moving towards liberation. It is very important. Like, stop playing games. I am not in the mood for these jokes where we crack jokes on each other about how we are dressing. This is liberation. I don't have time to have the luxury to laugh about those jokes. Dress African if you want to be welcome in Africa and you're an African. It's as simple as that. So as you see in this picture, you can't tell who's the one from the US and who's the one from Burkina, because they all look alike.
And mind you, sister, we have chapter members who came from France, who came from the UK, who came from the US, who came from Cote d'Ivoire, who came from Benin. So like I said, this is the importance of having organizations. We have chapters all over the continent, in Europe, and sadly we have 2 in the United States, but that's a story for another day in terms of our tax. But once again, like I said, there's African people. This is the importance of having an international organization, a grassroots organization, because now different groups of African people could come together to do the work. No, and you can say what you want to say about the leadership. I know certain people have issues with my teacher, Dr. Mazama, for whatever reasons. Maybe it's jealousy, but once again, she talks that talk.
But here's the thing, too. I'm glad you said that, right? We need to stop seeking perfection in our leaders, because we're not perfect. Like, if you, and this, I say this as far as relationships are, male-female relationships, are intimate relationships. For those women who are out there saying, I want my man to be this, that. For those men who are out there saying, I want my woman to be this, that. You best be bringing this, that. Do not ask for anything you're not willing to give. It's as simple as that. If you want someone who communicates, get good at communicating. If you want someone who's secure financially, you better be secure financially. Don't be here jobless and stuff and you're saying you want your man to have a job. No. So if you ask of certain things of the leader, make sure you're that way. But also, let's stop seeking perfection in each other. We're not perfect beings. We have flaws, right? And as long as our flaws are not harming our communities, let's be okay with looking past them and embracing the beauty of the person and the strengths and the skills of the person that are building the community. So I'm not seeking perfection in our leaders anymore, right? I will criticize the things about them that I know are harmful to the community. For example, if you say yes to a Western entity as far as working with us, when we know that, I'll give a simple example. If you today say yes to Bill Gates in Africa, as far as getting access to land, I'm going to say something about you, no matter how many good things you've done. And that's the difference, right? You may have so many good things you've done, but you invited Bill Gates, and Bill Gates is currently killing us with the food in Africa. So I will absolutely criticize you, because that's an greatly harmful character that you're embracing. So this is the difference. And we have to learn these nuances about who we are upholding and who we are criticizing. But go on, brother.
Absolutely. And I know in the West, many people may not understand the importance of Mambo Ama Mazama. Once again, my teacher and my spiritual mother, but she's very important because once again, she truly cares. And she's not just an academic, she's someone who's constantly on the ground, and her actions speak for herself. The truth needs no defense, especially Basaloma Beze. Like I've mentioned before, this was a meeting in this complex, in this office, with his team, and once again he canceled all his meetings that day after the conference just to meet with us, to build with us, and so we could also donate to the soldiers who lost their lives, but also once again to really give us the perspective on what's going on the ground, and some of the challenges they were faced with not only establishing the AES, but also what their vision was. Eventually, they do want to eventually move towards United States of Africa, which is also a stance of our organization and many of us. So once again, this was a leader, in my opinion, who cared about the people, who met with the students. Once again, took time out of his busy schedule, not only to go to the convention, to go to Kizerbo University, but also took time to meet with us in the diaspora. So once again, this is someone who's truly tied to the revolution and understands our importance and what we could contribute to the larger revolution. Because once again, this is not just a Sahel States revolution, this is an African revolution. And we all have to recognize the importance of this African revolution for all of us in the diaspora, all of us suffering. I mean, we see what's going on, once again, in Haiti, in Sudan, in Congo, and other places too, not just on the continent, but also throughout the world. So we understand the games being played by our enemies, but we also have to recognize there's a way that we dealt with our enemies in the past as well. For those of you who remember, once again, I mentioned Kemet because for those who are not familiar with the Francophone African world, this is why Mazam is important, but there's a larger movement known as the Kamit movement. You know, we like to say Kama, which is also another name for the entire continent. So once again, when we look at the history of ancient Kemet, remember you had the Amu, also known as the Hyksos, which are actually the descendants of original inhabitants of Israel. So once again, there's a story with that. But once again, very similar to when they were invited into ancient Kemet, when we gave them shelter, and then they tried to once again sack our temples and take over territory until Kamos and Amos once again expelled the Hyksos from their nation. So once again, there are lessons from the past of how we could deal with our enemies who try to once again move us off our own ancestral lands, move us on our own terms, and continue to impose themselves on us. So yes, there's a way that we need to deal with our enemies as we continue to promote and fight for this revolution.
Sorry, brother. As you were talking, you reminded me of a video we watched recently by Ivy Prosper. She has a channel on YouTube, and she interviewed Brother Diallo. So I'm just going to share that video for those of you in the audience. Watch that. It's going to help you understand how you need to move when you go back to the continent. For those of you out here in the West, that you need to have that communal mindset. Individuality is not welcome back home. We're going to deal with those who are already home, who have that Western mindset of individualism. That we will deal with. Don't be saying, why are you expecting this of us when you're like that in the continent? No, that we have acknowledged that we have that infection on the continent as well, individualism. But we'll deal with that. But as you, as someone who's been taken away from the motherland, choose to go back home, we're telling you, do not come back with individualism. Shed the individualism. And as Brother Diallo says in this video, you need an orientation. Before you go home, actually do an orientation. If you're going to Kenya, learn about the Kenyan people. Learn about the different nations in Kenya. Learn about what they eat, how they speak, how the protocol. For 6 months at least, learn about that. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to Kenya. Let me prepare which hotel am I going to? No, actually learn about the people and then move accordingly. So that communal spirit, and Diallo talks about it greatly, is what I'm encouraging. When I criticize people, because I'm seeing, again, brother, remind me what we're using instead of diaspora, because I agree with you. I don't want to use
I like to just say the African world. And the main reason I try not to use diaspora is because originally that was referred to the dispersion of the Jews. And, sometimes sometimes it doesn't, sometimes we don't recognize that us being, of course, the first people to incite the first civilization, also the first human beings, we have to recognize that, listen, we've spread across the world, in the globe. There's African people all over the world. You can find African people in the Middle East. You can find African people in Australia. You can find African people in the United States, in the Caribbean. So once again, that's why, and actually it was Dr. Mazama who actually pushed me towards that term when I was doing my dissertation. Instead of diaspora, you should just use the African world. The whole world is our province. And that's the stance I stand on.
So the African world, the extended African community in the world, please look at this video and understand what we're talking about, because the brother does explain it well. I was getting frustrated. I was trying to explain myself, and I saw him speaking on it. I was, thank you. Someone finally from that community is talking about it, right? It's not going to be Nduku no, it's going to be one of you, meaning you are not born and raised in the continent, but you're returning. Is telling you how you need to come, and it agrees with Nduku. The principle agrees with Nduku's principle, or the principle of our people. Really, it's not mine, that we need to be communal to be liberated. The individualism is our biggest enemy, and we cannot embrace individualism. Like, stop with the walk-in closets if you're going back home. Stop with that. You don't need a walk-in closet. You don't need a walk-in closet. Stop with the huge mansions. No, you don't need that. Where some rooms you've never even walked into for weeks, months, you've never even been into them. Stop with that. No need to impress your neighbors anymore. No need keeping up with the Joneses if you're going to be back at home. And if you are on the continent, this applies to you as well. Stop embracing Western culture that's harmful and unnecessary, that is so trivial. It doesn't contribute to our well-being is the point, and it causes more harm than it causes good to us. So let's shed those behaviors and start, like, if you have excess, put it in the community. If you know there's a school that doesn't have chairs, go buy chairs for them. If you know that there's a school that needs windows or repairing in the windows, instead of getting your walk-in closet, go pay for those windows. Again, the well-being and the development of our continent is all of our responsibility. And that's how we need to start moving. Go on, brother. We have a few minutes before the end of the session. Just talk about anything that you forgot to mention, anything that you need to highlight, any lessons that you learned that you want to share with our people that they need to learn, any important, anything important that you want them to learn from this, from your visit.
Absolutely. One of the most important lessons I learned is also to live my life with integrity and to humble myself. I know sometimes with our certain positions or titles, people get caught up with themselves. And I had a divination, and oftentimes I'm critical of myself too, based on how I came up in the United States and some of the behaviors that I'm also trying to do away with. It hasn't been easy, especially since I lost all my parents and my families. But it's very important that we do the work on ourselves. And I really commend the Burkina Bay people for also being an example for me in terms of reminding me how we should truly live our lives, living a full life with integrity, with honesty, and with purpose. It's a lot. It impacted me very deeply. I do have to say, I was a little depressed coming back, but I was relieved because we had a Juneteenth event in Atlantic City. So I do feel that more of our people. It's unfortunate that we have this colonizer, this murderer as a president, but I will say that it has allowed our people to begin to wake up and stop drinking their juice and their poison. I will say now you're starting to see, yes, people who are afraid, but also it is an opportunity for us to organize our people. So I will say that I'm re-energized to fight. Let me put it that way. Not necessarily to succumb to fear, to sit here depressed and not do anything, but I am remotivated to do the work. Oftentimes we need those reminders, which is why it's important for us to travel and to build with our people outside the United States. Sometimes it's good to escape the prison and then once again come back and get busy. But also we have to have a very honest discussion of, if you can, repatriating and leaving. How long are we going to continue to support the United States of murderers? And that's a hard conversation, even for myself, because I have a lot of family that I'm supporting that I love here, but we do have to begin to make an exit plan, but not just any exit plan. A lot of us will go back to the continent to live an American life. You can't do that. One of the things that I'm challenging myself is also to revisit different African languages, even Ayisyen Creole, because sadly I've been Americanized, so I'm not fluent in my own mother tongue, which is unfortunate. Because remember what I mentioned before, when you speak another language, you have a different way of thinking, a different psychology. And if we truly want to embrace African culture, we have to embrace African languages. I've come to that realization over the years, but it hit the point home, especially after this trip. So we have a lot of work to do, my people, even myself. And I hope to continue to honor our ancestors. I'm not perfect, as you mentioned, Sister Nduku. I have a lot of flaws. My perspectives needs works. Even my book, there were certain errors and revisions I'm going to have to make. In terms of my book, The African Revolution in Haiti, Liberté ou la Mort. And yes, Haiti is also fighting a revolution. And Jimmy Charizet, no matter how you feel about him, once again, this is somebody who sees himself as a revolutionary. And I do have some people on the ground who do commend his stance with the G9 Federation. Because they do see, once again, the United States imposition. I mean, we have rubidium, which is a valuable metal that can't melt. So once again, when you look at the resources, not just in IT, but also in Burkina Faso and many of our African nations, they know what we have. We need to realize what we have, and we have to realize that the world relies on us. If we decided to cut off all these powerful nations, they will literally starve to death. And we could really bring them to our knees. Yeah. The sad thing is that they have these weapons. Much like when they first came to colonize Africa with the cannons threatening certain kings to sell their neighbors or their rivals or their own people. So once again, it's the same mechanism when you talk about nuclear powers. That's the cannon of our era. So yes, we have a lot of work to do, but it's possible. And once again, this is why our motto is unity is our aim, victory is our destiny. Victory will be our undeniable destiny. Everything we're dealing with now is just a lesson. It's a task to bring us to where we need to go. But we're going to have a lot of our people who look like us who are going to also be in the way. I like to reference the film Spook Who Sat by the Door. For those of you who saw that film, as well as or read the novel by Sam Greenlee. But remember that last scene when he's informing those young Cobra members, once again, the youth, stating that don't stop fighting until either you win or die. Liberté ou la mort, freedom or death. Once again, Burkina Faso also has a similar motto. Once again, in terms of fighting for the nation or death. Once again, they have a very similar motto. And that motto is important. Yeah. Even another motto, Kupitet Bulakai. You have to cut off the head and burn the house. That's what makes a revolution. When you destroy the old infrastructures. And yes, America needs a revolution. America needs to burn. It does. And yeah, I might get in trouble for saying that, but let it burn.
Oh, the truth.
It will be fine.
Yes. It's the truth. This way that is not sustaining life needs to go. And you know what? For those of you who want to come and criticize Kimoni, John Perkins says it. A white man, an American white man who served this criminal enterprise and has a book now, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, says it, right? We have to get rid of the death culture and build a life culture. And that's exactly what he's talking about. The death culture has to burn. That's what America represents. It's not just about patriotism, loyalty to your nation and all that. No. What is America representing now? Death. Death everywhere. Death everywhere. Death in the food economy. Death in the financial, death in housing, death in schools. Like if you, for those of you who are not in the education spaces, it is a sad state of affairs. I'm telling you, people are in high school and they don't know how to read is what I'm witnessing. So death in education as well, right? Death in our bodies. Death in healthcare. There's no healthcare. It is health death. If you can get your mind to understand that concept, saying health and death in the same sentence and it being an actual phrase.
Sister,
right?
You're right. Because I was even jealous of what Burkina Faso has. Because when you look at their youth at the elementary level, even though they don't have the same resources as us in terms of our school system, their kids are more educated than our children. I'm talking about kids at 5th, 4th grade level doing advanced algebra, mathematics on a chalkboard outside.
I am so glad you brought that up, brother, because I had to say that to one of the teachers the other day. And I'm going to keep Sankara up and our brothers and sisters who visited just to remind you what time it is, Black people, African people, WanaUbuntu. Just to remind you what time it is in case you're confused. I will keep him there. But I said to the teacher, because I have been now observing for months the American education system, I said, you know something? The American education system is BS. This concept of America, because I'm an immigrant, expecting immigrants to come here and not valuing our education and saying, oh, you have to take ESL. Speaking the English I'm speaking right now, I write very well because I was trained for years to write very well and was actually at one point beaten by the teachers in order to write well. Both the physical writing, the actual, like the letters and how to write them, we were like, you had to use ruled books and your L had to sit on the line, not over, not under, and you would be punished for it. Training like that, right? And I said, and the way I came to tell this teacher this is I found out that that they'll only teach one science at a time. Like if they teach chemistry this year, they will not teach chemistry next year, they'll teach physics. And if they teach physics that year, they won't teach chemistry or physics the next year, they'll teach biology. And I'm like, how do you learn? How do you learn chemistry well if it's not consistent and repeated throughout your education life? How do you learn biology if you're only learning it 1 year? There's so much
Black children now. Black children who don't even receive the same sort of level of education amongst white students, especially if you come from my area. I'm originally from Spring Valley, New York, so I went through special education.
So African people, I'm going to tell you today, you are superior to the white man. I will say it today. It has been a lie told to you that they are superior. You learn chemistry, biology, and physics at the same time for years. That's what we learned. And when we got to high school, we had to choose 2 sciences based on our strengths. So I went with chemistry and biology. But you have to choose 2 that you learn for the rest of it, that you want to specialize in for the rest of the 4 years in high school. Are you kidding me? And even then, I don't, like, you still don't have, it's a continued learning process if you want to master chemistry, biology, or whichever science you choose. So African people, I'll tell you today, stop looking to the white man. The white man is a mediocre. There's mediocrity in the white man.
And sister, also geography, history, and language. Those are 3 areas they also do a terrible job teaching in the U.S.
We taught, like, I knew about our freedom fighters growing up. We learned about them. We learned about Jomo Kenyatta being, when they were arrested and all that. We traveled to the prisons where they were put. Like, these are things we learned growing up. So let's start understanding that we are a superior people. Now, I'm going to use that right now because we are using it. It's the harsh medicine to get from the depth of the place where we've been sent. It's not something that we should take on and walk with, right? But we are superior to them right now. What do I mean by that? Our skill level, our discipline, our care for humanity, our engagement with nature, our appreciation for life and our valuing of life, we are superior to them right now because they don't have any of those skills or qualities. They don't. Brother, what are your last words?
Once again, just a motto. Unity is our aim, victory is our destiny. The minute we have that stance, nothing will be impossible. No one can move us off our own terms once we have a culture foundation we stand on. That is our power. And that's a hill I'm going to die on. Yes, we're going to have a lot of our brothers and sisters. And in fact, there's a sister in Juneteenth who told the story of the eagle and the chicken. What happens when a farmer takes 2 eagle eggs and puts in a chicken hen, so much so that those eagles, this will be my last words. This will be a story. Once again, much like the griots or the griots.
Quickly, brother, don't lose the story, but quickly before you tell the story, because I want your story to be the last word. As you can see what I'm wearing, everyone, right? And I'm going to this is Cameroonian attire. Our brother Theo is running a house of African wear. Carl, I'm going to put it in the chat. Yes. So yeah, right. So this is what I'm wearing. Thanks to him. That please support. If you can support. Let's all. This is the Pan-Africanist. I will wear Cameroon and still feel like I'm African. I will wear Ugandan. I will wear Burkina. Our brother is wearing Burkina wear. Right.
Funny.
We move in all kinds of ways as Pan-Africans. Brother, tell us the story. Close.
So, a farmer one day takes 2 eagle's eggs and puts it in his chicken hen. And the mother sees the eggs and doesn't think nothing of it. And then, the first egg hatches, you see, beautiful chicks. And then one beak comes out of the egg and she knows a big beak. And she's like, oh, I have a big baby. I'm going to call you Cuckoo. And then another one comes up and she calls him Shy because he was very shy. But once again, she knows that these 2 birds are bigger than the other chicks. But nonetheless, she doesn't think nothing of it. And then as these chicks raised to be chickens, one gets older and older, and you notice that he's dragging his wings. So once again, he doesn't think nothing of it until one day an eagle flies and perches itself on a branch. And he notices this little eagle acting like a chicken. So he says, hey, you, what are you doing there on the ground with the rest of these chickens? He's like, well, I'm a chicken. He's like, no, brother, you are a brown eagle. You ain't one of these white chicks. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm a chick. He's like, no, don't you see these wings? These wings are meant for you to fly. You're not supposed to be crawling. He's like, I can't fly. He's like, come here, young chick. And he's like, what about my brother? He's like, oh, yeah, I seen your brother. I watched your brother several times. There's no saving him. But I could work with you. So, he attempts to fly. And at first he's floating, but then he tells him, spread your wings. Spread and flap your wings. And then he begins to fly. And then he begins to see certain sights on the ground. He begins to see a desert, and he says, what's that? He's like, don't worry about that. Don't go there. That's the desert of isolation. Then he sees an ocean, and he says, what's this? He's like, that's the ocean of despair. And where are we traveling now? He's like, we are going to the sky of freedom. We were meant to be free, meant to fly in the sky and spread our wings, because you are an eagle. You are not a chicken. So once again, that's just a reflection that we will never become a chicken. We will never become a white person, no matter how much you drink their juice, no matter how much you speak their languages, no matter how much you be your ideology. They'll always remind you that you will always be an eagle. You will always be a falcon, much like Haru. We are meant to spread our wings, Black people, African people. We are not meant to be chickens on the ground. It's much like the crocodile on the log. A log can never become a crocodile.
No.
Just like us as African people, we will never stop being African people. Even those who no longer want to be African, let them once again be that chicken on the ground that still sees itself as a chicken, even though it's an eagle. Let it run itself down to the ground of despair. But those of us who know better, we know who we are. We know our essence as African people. And once we recognize that, we'll continue to soar as the eagle in the sky. That's my point with you guys. I could have said that better, but
and to add humor, it's funny that you're saying that when we watched this yesterday, to add humor and to give you all something to laugh about, because humor and laughter is the medicine that we need in these times, and it's very essential. There's a Dave Chappelle video from back in the day where he's blind and he doesn't know he's Black, and he's spreading white supremacy until he finds out he's Black. Like, yo, go watch that. This speaks to that. Anyway,
and people laugh at it, but that was deep on so many levels. Once again, when you talk about how many of us have a white ideology and be drinking their juice, talking crazy, like literally losing our minds, thinking that we're them.
Yeah. But he, as brilliant as Dave Chappelle, as you all know he is, he uses blindness to get that message across. That you're blind. Like, you think you're seeing, but you're blind. And so you think you're white, but you ain't. You ain't white, and you're the white people.
You never will be. No matter how much you try to marry into their families, they're always going to remind you who you are. And whether you come to that realization, you will eventually. It is what it is.
I am lived experience witness to that. I can speak to that. But thank you, my brother. Thank you for all the wisdom. Thank you for all the lessons. It was great sitting with you. I look forward to seeing you and hearing more about all these stories. And just in case you all forgot what time it is, let me just remind you, because Sankara is going to remind you that's what time it is. That is what time it is. And sometimes it takes a disciplined military man to wake us up, to get us in shape.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes an upright military man, because we've seen now in Dessalines, in Sankara, in Traoré, that it can be done by a military man. If you in the United States are willing to embrace a clown, a reality show celebrity, then allow us to please embrace our upright military men as our leaders. Have a good day. Wish you well, everyone. My brother, stay behind. Please stay behind. Kila laheri, everyone.